Hello friends, welcome. Friends, you might have seen this article which came out today in the morning, which talks about India tightening SATCOM rules. Starlink, OneWeb, GeoSCS must meet new 30 security norms to offer services. Now, friends, those who are following the telecom sector must be aware that lot of discussion, brainstorming is going on to allow satellite services in India. We already are using terrestrial based mobile services, but satellite is going to give a different kind of empowerment where the telecom services can be reached out to areas where terrestrial mobile network is unavailable, but it poses lot of security risk. And especially after the attack which took place in Pahalgam, where Chinese Huawei based phones were alleged to be used to circumvent the ability of the security agencies to monitor operations of terrorists in that region, poses lot of concern to the security agencies. Probably because of that, these new sets of rules were released by Department of Telecommunication, which is an amendment to the Unified License Agreement for provisioning of GMPS services. So why I'm speculating this? Because GMPS services norms and all kind of security related issues have been already embedded in the license, and both Bharti and Reliance already have been granted GMPS license. Now changing the security norms now is definitely raises a speculation that the government of India is very concerned after the attack which took place in Kashmir, and therefore they don't want this new kind of network which has its own advantages and disadvantages to be used by anti-national elements. Now friends, why I am doing this video today? I want to take you through the details of this risk and what kind of provision the government of India wants the satellite networks to implement to prevent such kind of activities, right? And how the satellite operators can enable these requirements which the government of India is asking. Now, before I take you through the presentation, which is a structured set of slides, which will take you through this discussion, which I just enumerated in the beginning of my YouTube video, I will like to show you how the document, which was released on 5th of May by Department of Telecommunication, looks like, and what is the emphasis in this document, which is very important to understand. So this is for all UL as well as GMPS service authorization. So what it is saying, there are various provisions like lawful interception, etc. We know, but one of the most critical part in this document, or few critical elements in this document, which I have highlighted here, which I'm going to point out, which is about geofencing. In terrestrial network, geofencing is typically not used. It is not emphasized upon. You can use it for different type of purposes, like for example, geofencing services could be offered to track pets, etc. Those are offered by the service providers. But here, geofencing is a requirement driven by the security concern, and it is a license requirement. So one is geofencing. Second is special monitoring zone, which is 50 kilometers international border. Then we are talking about website blocking, which is natural, when the government of India is always, very about any network to be used by to access any website which they don't want, right? Then there is one more very important thing. Mobile phones are typically can be carried anywhere. For example, let's say if you are working in Mumbai and you get transferred, and you can carry your mobile without any problem. It is not a fixed device. But if there is a fixed line phone that you are using in your house, that cannot be carried and the number will change. But your mobile number remains same throughout the country. Here also, though the satellite devices will be fully mobile, what they are talking about, that there is a provision that they want to implement where some people will be given the flexibility to be mobile, but there are some devices which will be tied to the geolocations, and it will not be allowed to move unless a permission is granted through authorization. So if you read this, you can just pause the video and read this clause, which is clause number 11. And then it is talking about any kind of unregistered device, because all devices which are registered in India has to be permitted as per the license. But if there are some unregistered devices which comes into India, they are only allowed to operate in specific locations which are geofenced within India territory, not in any other location. And there is no location spoofing which will be allowed. And in future, because currently these things are going to be implemented through GPS, but in future it will be done through Navic positioning system, which will be Indian GPS system, right? So these are the key provisioning elements which are mentioned in this document. Now let's go to my presentation. Why India has imposed stringent GPS rule post Pahalgam attack, and what is achievable and what is not. This is what we're going to discuss. Now the context is very simple. There is a satellite system called Tiantong. I don't know whether I'm being able to pronounce this properly or not, but it is using a Huawei based system. And those phones are alleged to be smuggled in India. And those terrorists were, it has been reported in the press, although I don't know for sure, they have been using that phone to just circumvent tracking by the security agencies. And this is a geostationary satellite system which bypasses Indian system, because every country will have their own satellite communication system. Chinese also have their own satellite communication system, but these satellite communication systems, because these are located in 36,000 kilometers above the earth, have got very large footprint. So when you are trying to cover the area of China, there will be some spillover into Indian territory also. That was leverage, and how we can prevent that spillover, we are going to discuss in this video. So if this is true, then it is definitely exposing a gap in India's SATCOM surveillance system. I think that is why this order has been released, and modification has been done in the license condition to club some of the deficiencies in the current system. So why satellite communications are a national security concern? Because terrestrial communication is also a security concern, but satellite is a bigger security concern. Why? Because it works without any local tower. There are fixed towers which is being used for terrestrial communication. You are tied to the power tower. So commonly you might have seen various serials. They are tracking the location of the device by looking at the tower. So once you know where the tower is, you will be able to track the device, even if you do not have a very accurate information about the location of the device, which typically can be done using a GPS-based system. But tower is a very, very convenient way to track terrorist activities or anti-social activities. But you can't do it for satellites, because satellites are moving in the sky. So they are not fixed towers in which are housed or grounded in a location, right? And it is encrypted. The signals are encrypted, hard to track. You cannot track those satellite-based communication. The devices are very small. They can be easily smuggled, right? Like a regular mobile phone across the border. Already there are alleged possible used in Manipur also with Starlink devices, though they've been, the company has refuted that those devices were found, but they were not in use. So anyway, I'm not going to talk about all the speculation. I'm saying that, there is a possibility, right? Which we have already seen in Manipur, right? So the terrestrial versus satellite network, just to give you a brief understanding. So terrestrial system has a tower which is grounded. Here you can see the tower is grounded. So you can use a phone and talk to the tower. So looking at this tower, or anybody who wants to track this device, they can very easily do so by looking at the cell ID and which tower you are hooked onto. But in case of satellite, the satellite is moving in the sky. So therefore, there is no way you to track by using the satellite. Therefore, GPS-based system has to be used. Now, India's security response, GMPS licensing framework. I told you Geo Fencing of Indian territory, which is very, very crucial. And I'll tell you how the Geo Fencing works. Mandatory knock gateway, which is standard. It was earlier also there. Only registered IMEI SIM systems are going to be allowed, which is also in conventional mobile system, the same thing is there, right? Lawful interception is also same. Only difference is the geofencing of Indian territory, which is very, very crucial and different from the terrestrial network. What India wants to achieve? It wants to stop unauthorized devices from connecting to satellite. Very simple. We don't want any unauthorized devices to be connected, and which can circumvent the Indian surveillance system. So it also wants to prevent spillover from nearby country, because the same satellite operator may be operating in Pakistan, maybe in Bangladesh, in Sri Lanka, or in Myanmar, or in Burma, Myanmar, Burma, same, in Bhutan or any other country, where there could be signals can spill over into Indian territory, and using their network, within the Indian geography, some activities can take place, and that has to be prevented. Ensure the total monitoring of licensed GMPS traffic and block smuggled devices within the country. What is geofencing and how it is implemented? Now, typically, geofencing is nothing but knowing the location of the device from where you are operating. It can be very easily done if the network is accurately able to pinpoint the location. So, conventional terrestrial network, it can be done using a GPS based system, or there could be some network assisted GPS system which can triangulate the location of the device, and where by knowing the location of the device you can prevent an operation in a particular area, and you can enable an operation in a particular area, and you can prevent an operation in some other area. Now, in case of satellite system, also it is possible to identify from where that device is communicating by using the GPS based identification. From where the location of the device is, it can very easily be identified. So you can do a GPS based geofencing of these devices and create a virtual boundary by allowing and blocking satellite access. So there could be GPS based system, or there could be a Doppler system. What is Doppler? Doppler is that when a satellite is moving away or towards a handset, that movement can be tracked. And using that movement tracking, you can very easily figure out where the device is located on the surface of the earth. So the satellite network blocks access if it is outside allowed zone, right? Geo versus LEO satellite control comparison. Now, there are two types of satellite here. What was used in using the Huawei phone in Jammu and Kashmir during the Pahalgam attack was a geo system. Geo means geosynchronous orbit. It is 36,000 kilometers on the surface of the earth, where the distance between the phone and the satellite is pretty large. There could be a lot of delay in communication. The communication may not be seamless, and the satellite's phone has to be of a special kind in order to talk to those large distances. 36,000 kilometers is a very, very large distance, and for that that distance is needed, because otherwise these satellites are not going to be synchronous with the rotation of the earth. It has to be stationary on the from the point where the horizon visibility of the satellite is available to the phone, whereas LEO satellites are located much lower orbit, and they are moving at a very fast space, and they have narrower spot beams, whereas in case of GEO, the spot beams are quite wider, and therefore doing a geofencing using a GEO satellite is a little difficult compared to a LEO satellite. And the Starlink is a LEO system, so it will be easy, right? Why LEO is more compliant and capable? Because dynamic spots beam avoid sensitivity zone, because the beams are very, very narrow. You can configure the beam in such a way that sensitive zones can be very easily avoided. Doppler tracking enables accurate geolocation. Starlink and OneWeb can enforce these specific rules in India very easily. Now, let's say that India, which is a sovereign country, and Starlink will be granted license within the territory of India, but India does not have any control over Pakistan or Bangladesh or any neighboring country. If such kind of rules, which India is emphasizing a satellite operator to follow, is not followed in other countries, then what India is going to do? Because it could happen that there will be some spillover from other countries to Indian territory, just like what happened in case of China. China's satellite must be having a footprint on Kashmir, and that's why those devices were being used. So how do you ensure that companies like big companies like Starlink follow similar procedure in Pakistan, Bangladesh, and other neighboring countries to prevent signals spilling over from Bangladesh or Pakistan into Indian territory to be used by the devices which are registered in those countries? So you don't have direct leverage, but you have got indirect leverage. You can say that, look, you have to ensure that no RF signal spills over from one country's border to other country's border. If you don't do that, if you are not going to agree to that, we are not going to allow. So you can have a indirect influence on these companies to have similar kind of geofencing rules to be implemented in those countries also. So blocked unless Pak Bangladesh beams are geofenced, right? Which we have to do. Only registered terminals are allowed in the country. Requires terminal tracking near border. Kill switch for sensitive zones, right? Which we can implement. But China is a different problem. Here, Chinese state satellites, right, are not under any kind of control. There is no obligation for China to implement what India wants to implement, right? So there is no cooperation with Indian agencies. So by allowing Starlink in India, this problem will not be solved, right? So we need to figure out a different way to ensure Chinese support. So what we can do, what India can do about China, India can have RS surveillance near the border, custom and IMEI filtering we can do. You can basically go to the ITU and start, file an objection that if there are some spillover which are happening in Indian territory, those needs to be managed. Otherwise, there's some power limitation has to be implemented by those satellites so that in India's those beams are weaker, therefore nobody can use them. Indigenous MSS development can be done, right, to monitor those satellites. The final takeaway, GMPS control are essential for national security. India can regulate Starlink one way through licensing, but China needs surveillance detection and strategic independence, right? Without that, we need to ensure that somehow you have to mitigate the problem which is emanating out of China. Unless we do so, we will never be able to deal with that problem. Rest of the problem will be dealt with, because if an operator is operating within India and like Starlink and is operating in other neighboring countries also, it is possible to influence that operator to follow the same kind of procedure in other countries so that they don't spill over in each other territory, right? So I think that's all, friends, in this video, and hope that you understood that why India implemented these rules and what are the national security risks that India is trying to protect. And hopefully that all our satellite operators will follow this rule, and we will never have such kind of events which took place in Kashmir. We're using these kind of devices which have a lot of flexibility to be used anywhere they want to be used, and they can be misused. That's all, friends. Thanks for listening till the end, and I'll come back with a new video next time on a new topic. Thank you very much.